welcome to the Federal Youth Network Virtual Learning Series. Today we're going to be talking about Distributed Teams 101 with the Flex GC network, but a few housekeeping items before we get started. I am coming to you from Moncton, New Brunswick, which is the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples. I would like to recognize that many of you are participating from other traditional territories all over the country, and I'd like you to take a couple moments just to reflect on what that means. Alors, salutations de Moncton. Moncton est un territoire traditionnel non cédé des peuples Mi'kmaq. Je tiens également à souligner que beaucoup d'entre vous participent à cette activité en venant d'autres territoires traditionnels de tout autour du pays. This session today will be offered bilingually, so we will do a little bit of flipping back and forth, but myself and all of the panelists are bilingual, so we'll be able to accommodate the answers to your questions, whichever language you ask them in, whether that's in the chat or during the Q&A. Alors, si vous voulez, vous pouvez vous poser les questions dans la langue de votre choix. So thank you so much for being here. Today with us, we have Paul, Christine, Natasha, and Frank from the Flex GC network. They're going to tell you a little bit about what that network is. They're each going to introduce themselves and talk about what their specialty is and what it is that they bring to the network. And then we're going to dig into Virtual Teams 101. We're going to talk about how you can manage that team and the relationships on your team. So I will let you guys take it away. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I always want to do a check because there has been times where I'm talking and no one can hear what I'm saying. So, all right, well, thank you for joining us today. I am working with low-grade tech, my telephone. Zoom is not allowed on my department laptop, so I am connecting today via telephone. So apologies if you hear any dogs barking or kids or doorbells. It happens sometimes. So today we'll be discussing Distributed Teams 101. And if you wouldn't mind opening up the deck, we'll just get started. So for your best experience today, please note that your VPN should be turned off. It's not required, but it does give you better experience. Please mute your microphones if you aren't speaking, although I think that Zoom does that for you, so I'm not sure. And please be sure to use the chat function to pose all your questions and have some side chatter that we would love to look at and reflect upon after. If you could go into the first slide, please. So today we're going to be reviewing a variety of items for distributed teams, and we'll be covering all of these great things. I'm not going to list them, you can see them there. We are going to be talking about empathy mapping coming up soon as well. So that will be done via Jamboard, and hopefully you have access to it. Christine, my colleague, will be sharing the link in the chat right now. So all of these items, they matter with culture and team cohesion. So that's what we will primarily be discussing today is, distributed teams and a good culture and a good team camaraderie. If you could go to the next slide, please. So my name is Natasha. I am a free agent posted to the Public Service Renewal Secretariat at PCO. I'm also a regional remote employee who has been working this way since before the pandemic. It's been a couple of years now that I've been working remotely. So has been an adjustment for everyone, even for those of us who worked this way before. I'm also an event planner. And I have 6 children at home with me half of the time when I am working and presenting. So hopefully I can get through this presentation without all of them coming into the house. I'm speaking to you today from London, Ontario. And that is the traditional land of a cross-section of Aboriginal people. So I just noted it on my card because I can't even pronounce it properly, but I just wanted to recognize that I am at an intersecting point, which I think is quite interesting. And I'm going to pass it along to my colleague, Christine.
Thank you, Natasha. I'm a Christine Vesna, and I'm a digital communication and literacy advisor over in the digital transformation team, serving Health Canada and FAC, Public Health Agency of Canada. I'm currently the lead for the Get Update on COVID-19, the email subscription. I got 21 years experience with the government, in different departments. And I've been also working remotely for 3 years now. So this is different than pre-COVID. And I'm also a FlexGC member since April 2020. And I'm available to support mes collègues dans les 2 langues officielles. Je passe la parole à Paul.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hi, I am Paul Keller. I am currently located in Quebec City, which is also the traditional territory of Wendake and the St. Lawrence Iroquois. I am actually a ex-complex cases collections officer from the CRA, where I was also an innovation ambassador. In my innovation ambassador role, I was dealing with a regional network. And so I'd say that's pretty much where I started working in a distributed team. Although I've been working full-time since March, which is probably the case for a lot of people. Since then, I have become a project manager at the Quebec Federal Council's Innovation Lab. And I've also been part of FlexGC since last April. So really interesting network, lots of good stuff going on. So I wanted to be part of that. This would bring me to the next slide and the actual beginning of the presentation. So the question, what makes a great distributed team? So we've identified 5 elements. The first one being trust. And so you have to trust yourself and you have to trust your team. Sometimes you can feel discouraged, but you have to adopt a constructive attitude and truly believe in your capabilities. And you also have to trust your teammates to follow through on their deliverables. So you got to let them work and trust that they'll get the job done, or let you know if they need help. The second element, which is crucial, is communication. So extremely important to stay connected with your team to build good team spirit. So put whatever tools or platforms your team has chosen to good use. If you feel like it, reach out without having any expectations. But when you want to talk to a teammate on the fly, because sometimes a 2-minute conversation can be highly efficient compared to back and forth messages in a very short period of time. And also these 2-minute conversations can be what it takes to make you feel part of something while you're working from home, obviously. Also, let your team know what your short-term objectives are. And if you're up to it, tell them how you're doing on a more personal level. They'll have a better understanding of what your difficulties are, and they'll be in a better position to support you. So communication, very important. Collaboration. So you need to focus on the strengths of your peers when working on joint files or projects. See, I'm definitely not the organizer because of my scattered mind. I'm more of a passionate frontline networking visionary. That's what I do. Those are my strengths. And so in a team, that's the kind of tasks that I'll undertake. But also you mustn't forget that interest and skills development can count as well. And so offer to mix it up. If you feel your role has become uninteresting or too repetitive, you can find ways to open your horizons by helping your peers with specific tasks. But when the pressure's on, you can feel it, it's okay to say no too. Better to say no than to not come through on your promises. And saying no can actually make you a better teammate. Cohesion. So what is your team's common vision and what role do you play in it? So what are the roles of your team members, and is this all properly defined? Team cohesion ensures that all moving parts are working towards a common objective. So Natasha is actually going to get into a few tools later to help you out with that, to properly define roles and that vision also known as a team charter. Another aspect which I personally find extremely important and that I'm working on is recognition. So it's important to let people know when you appreciate something they've done. So you got to be sincere and explicit about it. If your team has recognition methods in place, such as the Microsoft Praise app, which integrates with Microsoft Teams, or perhaps you have an internal platform that you guys use them and use them often. Help create a culture where even the little things are not taken for granted, because a good old pat on the back often provides a boost of positive energy and is beneficial to the team. We can move on to the next slide. This next slide is what Natasha spoke about at the beginning, a concept called empathy mapping. So an empathy map is a design thinking process that helps us gain a deeper understanding of a person or a group of people. So oftentimes businesses will use this to know their customers. So mapping out how someone is feeling is something we do intuitively on a daily basis, whether it be by reading between the lines of something they wrote, or the things they say and the way they are said, or through their body language and facial expressions. I've personally found that you can fake a smile, but that a person's eyes usually don't lie. So for some people, empathy comes naturally, while others need to build empathy through a rational process, which is why mapping things out can help us get a clearer picture of where someone is coming from. This type of map can be constructed to better understand a teammate. Example, she's ranting a lot these days. Why? Or a supervisor. So I'm not sure I understand that decision. What other forces are behind it? Or an employee. She seems disengaged these days. How come? So those are all questions that we can ask ourselves, to try to learn more about our teammates and try to support them and get them on board in that common vision that we were referring to earlier. So if I could, I'd share my screen and show you guys the Jamboard. I don't know if it's started to get filled out yet. Just bear with me. Okay. Would it
I'll
be
stop sharing.
Yeah, please.
No problem.
Could you, the link is in the chat. Do you think you could share that instead? I seem to have sharing disabled here. Oh,
I enabled it, Paul. I apologize.
no problem. Thank you very much. All right, so I'm just going to share this right here. So this basically is a typical empathy map. The one that we saw earlier, which I didn't go into detail, we'll get back to it, but I just wanted to give you guys an explanation so that you could start filling this out. So basically what the objective here today is to create a collective empathy map of things that you are personally going through. So this map will basically, help people in this this presentation or participating in this presentation to have an idea of what the kind of things that people are thinking and feeling these days. What are they hearing? What are they seeing? And what are they saying and doing? So we can perhaps just go back to the slide and I'll let people fill it out, and maybe we can come back at the end once we've had some stuff that's been generated in there. But it's important to think about you, and this collective map will basically give us some pretty interesting information, I think. So I'll stop sharing this and let you guys go back to the deck.
Perfect. We'll move on to the next slide. Thanks, Paul. So as Paul mentioned, good team culture begins with trust, but it also helps to have a little bit of insight and a good plan. And as an event planner, I know a thing or two about planning. So let's talk about that. My favorite planning tool for team cohesion and culture is a team charter. Team charters is essentially a one-pager where you can have a team consensus on the vision of your group and where it's going. You can have consensus on how you choose to collaborate. You can have consensus on what processes as a unit, both administratively and functionally, you'd like to keep, avoid, or adopt. These team charters are great to keep your team aligned, and it's good to revisit the team charter quarterly. As of right now, sorry, there's my dog, see, happens. We're in an unusual state of affairs, and everything seems to be changing every single day, and sometimes it's even hourly. So it's better to revisit it, and we've been sort of re-looking at ours every quarter. So Christina's just shared that link in the chat for you to reference. If you do adopt a team charter, please share it with FlexGC. We love looking at them and seeing the different ways that people have incorporated them. And we do have a list of ones that we love. So it would be great if you could share yours with us. Also, there's other fun ways to build a good team culture, and you can use character cards. There is a user guide to me, and there's like an ID sort of card that you can do. We call it an employee ID card in our place of work. So we're going to talk about that in the next slide. If you could flip to that, please, we'll show an example of one. So this is my colleague's, Jen's employee ID card, and I didn't even ask her if I could share this today. We've shared it in other sessions, so I hope she's okay that I'm sharing it again. But this is an idea of how an employee ID card could look. And let's face it, we're all different. We all have different preferences and different work styles. It existed. We all had different styles before we worked remotely and from home during a pandemic. So why would it be any different now? Before, you could travel through your office and get to know each other. We could talk, we could read body language, and you could understand, how someone would appreciate to work with you and collaborate. Now we can no longer do that. We're all in our houses. How do you sort of break that barrier from a virtual standpoint? So, figuring out how you best work, what that person values, what's their pet peeves, when's their most productive moments is hard when you're working virtually. So these little ID cards help to communicate that, and it also keeps it a little bit fun. Here you see that it's Jen's ID card, and we've used it to get to know each other in the office. We have a template that we have on our Trello board, which I'll get Christine to share if she has a moment. We didn't plan for that, but the Trello board does have a template that people could use to create this in their office. And, it's a good way to get to know each other and have a few laughs. So I'll run through Jen's card. How she likes to communicate best is by email, text, or video meeting request. She tends not to be as direct in her communications, so call her out and ask her for clarification. She spends a lot of time on the phone, so she would prefer to schedule chats instead of getting cold calls out of the blue. She values pragmatism, being on time, and humor. What she doesn't like is negativity, vertical silos, when meeting invites go unanswered. And then just for fun, we put in when you're not at work, you can find me doing skiing, biking, hiking, reading, cooking, and nagging. And I thought that was funny. We had a laugh about that. So anyway, you can make it fun. You can link it to your vision, mission, and mandate. You can do that with your team charter. You can do it with an ID card. You can do it with a user to me guide, which Christine just shared the link in the chat. So moving on to the next slide, and I'll pass it over to Paul.
Awesome. Thanks, Natasha. So this slide right here is actually a very, very short summary of a 1 hour long presentation that I give on resilience. So basically, I found it important to get into this just because, if you want your team to be healthy, you also have to be healthy on a more personal level. So I wanted to go through the 5 pillars of resilience real quickly. The first one is self-awareness. So self-awareness is having a clear perception of your personality, including your strengths, your weaknesses, your thoughts and your beliefs, your motivations, and your emotions. So for example, it's raining outside and I'm feeling kind of gloomy right now. Yesterday, I was feeling anxious about this presentation, but I want to help people, so I'm willing to feel uncomfortable to achieve that. But I also have a lot on my plate right now. I'm starting to feel tired. Perhaps I need to drop a few things that are less important or lower priority. So that is the kind of introspection that comes out of self-awareness. Oftentimes what's the difference between self-awareness and mindfulness? And this is actually something that I have to study myself to be able to explain this properly. And mindfulness is basically a state of active, open attention on the present. And I put emphasis on that word, the present. So self-awareness can include the emotions you feel while projecting to the future or dwelling on the past, right? But mindfulness is disconnecting yourself from those emotions and living the moment. So for example, when my kid comes in the door at the end of the day, I'm in the middle of a task, it's easy to, I'll go even as far as to say feel resentment towards the responsibilities that I have because I have this task that I really want to finish, right? And so what happens is that when I start taking care of my kids, I'm still in my mind, I'm still in that task that I'm trying to perform, and I'm not in the present moment. And so that's not beneficial for my kid. And that's not beneficial for me either, because even when I'm disconnected from my computer, I'm not totally disconnected, and therefore I'm not relaxing and, taking a breather, which everybody needs. So that's mindfulness. It's being able to, as soon as these anxious feelings come, just not attach to them and let them go by and focus on the moment. Self-care is our ability as human beings to function effectively in the world while meeting the multiple challenges of daily life with a sense of energy, vitality, and confidence. So this includes drinking and eating well, getting enough fresh air and exercise, sleeping well, sleeping enough, finding time for relaxation and hobbies, reaching out when you're feeling lonely. These are all part of self-care, and they require your active engagement. So easy to say, I'll eat right after this, and then not eat, or eat until very, very later, or say, I'll go put some socks on later, right? Because your feet are cold, and ending up working uncomfortably for a long time, possibly even affecting your performance. So you have to take care of yourself, because if you take care of yourself, that will reflect in your performance and, basically your life all around, quite honestly. Positive relationships is the next one. They are the people that support and care for us, and we care for them. Team members should be part of your positive relationship circle. That's not to say they need to know about all your personal difficulties, although if you want to share, go for it. But positive professional relationships are an integral part of our lives. And so we need to be empathetic towards the needs of our team members. Purpose. This is an interesting one, because in my view, purpose is one that you can have on a personal level, but you can also have purpose as a team. So purpose is a recognition that we belong to and serve something bigger than ourselves. So the way I see it, our purpose is what our conscience wants to project into the universe. And I know that's philosophical, but that's who I am. My purpose is taking care of my family, making statements artistically, and innovating to address human needs. Everybody has their own purpose. So we can each have purpose on a personal level, but it's also important for distributed teams to have a common purpose as well, whether it's meeting and possibly surpassing program objectives, advancing a particular agenda or a project, or encouraging mental health and wellness. So a team can have a purpose as well, a vision, and this can be reflected in that team charter that Natasha was talking about. So that's it on my end.
We can pass it over to the next slide.
Yeah, next slide.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, and thanks for bringing up mindfulness. I find that super important, especially when like I'm working at home with all my children around me. It can get frustrating, and so I just want to say, like, as a caveat to everyone, like, this is not a normal time, and we're all trying to cope the best way we can. But really, like, if you think you're going to master it, you're not going to, and that's okay. You know, and there's people out there to help support you. So moving along to meetings, you know, it seems like nowadays that our meetings are more frequent, and a lot of the times, you know, they're back to back, and it can be frustrating. We can't just walk and talk to each other like we did before. So we have to be purposeful with our meetings and think mindfully about how we are scheduling them. So considering the quantity and quality of your meetings is sort of like the key starting point. What does that mean? That means, like, how many meetings do you need in a day actually? Do you really need to have a meeting from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. like back to back to back? Can they be broken up into smaller little chunks where you're dissecting little nuggets of information? Is the frequency important? You know, thinking about freeing up some time where you can actually roll up your sleeves and get some work done and not be in meetings all day long. So, you know, there's lots of key ingredients to figuring out the right recipe for you. So starting off meetings in a fun and informal way, I think is really organic and should happen when you're working on your team culture and your cohesion. It should just be a natural thing. Everyone should be allowed to say hello, share how their weekend went. Any fun jokes or tips or tricks is a good way to sort of break the ice before you start diving into the very serious meat of a discussion. You know, gauge your audience. If you're going to meet in a formal capacity, you know, presenting to your deputy ministers, maybe you don't want to have that joke portion. You can leave it out, but you can still ask, how was your weekend? Did you have a nice weekend? I hope everyone is well. You know, and those organic sort of introductions really make people relax a little bit and help feel connected as you're going through those meetings. So, you know, like I mentioned, we can't walk through our offices anymore, but maintaining that normal interactions with your colleagues like we did before is very healthy, and we should continue to do that even though we're in a pandemic. So remember to be inclusive in your meetings and give everyone a chance to speak. And if they want to speak, sometimes they may not want to, and that's okay too. You know, make sure when you're scheduling your meetings that you're deliberate about scheduling your meetings. Double check in the Outlook calendar, check and see where your team members are at. If you're capable of seeing where they are, I always recommend working in the open with your team. Then, you know, you can see if they've got back-to-back meetings, and maybe you're being mindful of not overbooking them as well as not being overbooked. Think about the purpose of the meeting. Be clear in your introduction and invitation so your colleagues aren't left second guessing as to why are we meeting again? We just met, you know, an hour ago, and add some clarity so that they know, no, this is a completely different subject matter. And so there is a purpose for this meeting. If applicable, think about the different time zones, and also think about reoccurring meetings. If this is something that needs to happen weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, then that's something that you should plant in the schedule ahead of time so that it's landed there permanently, so that those people can then plan their extra time of work that they're doing around that already planted permanent staple in their calendar. Make sure that you're creating space between meetings. And I think this is super important, especially for like going to the bathroom, checking on your kids. You know, does your dog need to go outside and go to the bathroom? Stretch your legs, have a drink of juice, eat a sandwich. You know, these little pauses in between your meetings are important. And especially, you know, it's easy to get up and sit in your chair and work all day long from 8 a.m. till, you know, sometimes 7 p.m. and not stop, not get up, not do what you need to do to stay healthy and for your physical health and for your mental health. So taking those breaks, I think, are really important. Also, just for everyone's sanity, and I know it's not possible everywhere, but in your team, you know, maybe have a conversation about meeting free days, or meeting free mornings, or meeting free Wednesday morning, you know, wherever you can book a block of time to free up some time to actually get work done. It's nice to be able to do that. And if you know, like every Wednesday from 8 until noon, we never have a meeting, then I'm not going to book a meeting, because I know that that's when you're working, and, you know, Paul's working and Christine's working. And so I'm not going to interrupt their flow. Sometimes, you know, you have to think about, is it important to work together as a team? Is it important to work, you know, as a micro team individually, just a couple of you? So really be thinking about how many people need to be at this meeting, how much information you'll be sharing, and if you need to share it broadly, or if you can keep it sort of between a smaller group. And that will allow some time for other people to get work done as well. And then at the end of your meetings, be deliberate about communicating your points or follow-up action items. Confirm these in writing, and like you can use your MS Teams messaging, your channels, your email, whatever platform that you use that's good for you, that you've agreed on in your team charter with your team to use. But like communicating that is key too, because then everybody knows what their role is, what they left the meeting with, whatever task, and they know what they're going out to complete. If you can go on to the next slide, please. So continuing on tips with connecting with your team, you know, there's some great tips out there, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of them by now, but some of our faves that we've been using at Flex GC, and also that I've been using at my office as well, is, you know, trying to connect informally sometimes, the 5 to 7 gathering, the coffee connection, maybe a team channel for fun jokes or recipes. Those are nice ways to connect with your colleagues. Before, we used to be able to go out on a Friday after 4:30 and have a beverage together. Now we can't do that anymore. So we have to be a little bit more innovative about the ways that we're connecting with our colleagues. And, you know, sometimes that includes a social aspect. So, you know, you can still do that. Have some fun in your team meetings, you know, do something with your tech tools where everyone's participating, you're having a good time, and you're sharing a new tech tool or an idea. Everybody can use, you know, a new technology and learn with you. You could try a Jamboard like we were just doing with Paul. You can use a Trello board. You can use a Miro board. There's lots of technology out there, and my colleague Christine's going to talk about that. That's shared, that people can use, so that you can try and bring people together in a good way, collaborating and sharing ideas. And then, like, some people have done like a theme or a dress up, a Friday hat day, or you know, we had one where we did puppets. I can't believe I'm telling a whole bunch of people this, but we had a puppet day, and it was hilarious. We laughed. Anyway, there are more practical tips to connecting this way, and that's like, you get to test out your tech ahead of time, and maybe you have a tech buddy in your team that you bounce, you know, back and forth ideas with. This is a way of creating culture. This is a way of connecting, but it's also, you know, a win-win, because you're learning a new skill at the same time. If you can, you know, get a good headset, something that's noise canceling. And I'm like not practicing what I'm preaching right now, because my headset has decided to disconnect from my phone, and I spent like 30 minutes trying to reconnect it, but you know what? I had a presentation, so I'm going with it. But if you can, a really good sound canceling headset is great. You know, and also make sure your headset and your mic is working before you get into a meeting, which is why I always ask, can you hear me? Because I have spent so many times where I start talking and then someone holds up a sign that says you are on mute. So, you know, that is a really good segue for tech tools, which I'm going to flip over to my colleague Christine to share with you right now.
Oui, et merci Natacha. Mon headset fonctionne bien. Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Oui. Oui, c'est super important d'être bien outillé. Je vais le faire peut-être un petit peu en français pour montrer que oui, on est effectivement bilingue. Je dirais qu'à une époque de plus en plus caractérisée par les données, le numérique, entre guillemets, digital, les nouveaux aménagements de milieux de travail ou les milieux de travail à la maison depuis quelques mois, les cultures de travail moins hiérarchisées et la collaboration entre plusieurs générations, c'est essentiel d'examiner puis d'adopter les mentalités et des comportements qui répondront à l'évolution des attentes, dans le fond, des Canadiens. Les résultats souhaités, c'est d'avoir une fonction publique qui est plus agile, plus inclusive et mieux outillée. As you know, tool devices are changing continuously and the pace will only increase. Ça va juste augmenter. Before you find the right tools, you need to think differently, to navigate through those constant change. We need to explore different ways of doing things. In fact, we need to shift the way that we think, our mindset and behaviors. We need to shift the way that we learn. We need to invest time in learning. We need to, they call it T-shaped skill, which is where you deep dive into something. Like you need to learn how MS Team works. You go, you learn it, and you keep on going, and you learn as you go. You deep dive into those learning pockets. And we also need to shift the way that we work. We need to collaborate widely. That's what we're doing with MS Team, with Slack, with those different instant messaging workspace. So how we are embracing and adopting the tools and any other collaboration tool can help you navigate those change and positively influence your team. Shifting the way that we think, learn, and work is in line with the culture, skills, and collaboration needed for the digital era. At the end of the presentation, I will share a blog from CSPS. It's Always Be Learning. It was published September 14, not too long ago, and it talks about adaptability and curiosity. I'll move on to the next slide. So in order to find the right tools, you will need to experiment. Pick a few collaboration tools and test them out, but I mean really test them out. Don't try to test them for a week. 1 week will be sufficient. Plan a longer period based on your team. Like ask your team to be involved and see like how long would it take to figure out one tool, and experiment to know what works for your team, because something that will work for your team might not work for another team, and that's okay. You just need to figure out which tool will work for you or for your team. You need to promote a culture of openness. Keep an open mind to new ways of doing things. As I mentioned before, be ready to try new tools as you find them out, but be aware of tool fatigue, because if you're trying to learn too many tools all at once, it might not be a big success. Iterate and improve frequently. That is being agile in one of the digital standards that Paul mentioned earlier, digital standard for public servant that we must apply. If you find something that doesn't work, stop using it and try something else, as long as you respected the deadline that you said that you would test the tool. You can't just test it for 1 day and say, I give up. We must learn to fail, because to innovate, you must be prepared for dead ends. But the buzzword on that matter are fail fast, fail often, and fail forward. On that note of going forward, over to Paul for the Distributed Team 101 recap.
Hey, thank you, Christine. So yeah, just to surf on your last point about iterating, I think we've all been in this situation for a few months now. There might be some methods that we've developed with time, but what you said, Christine, is totally true. Things are moving so fast right now that when you analyze these tools initially as a team, and they fit your needs at that time, well, perhaps right now there's actually a better solution that's out there for you. So stay open to that possibility and don't be afraid to, scratch what you have and start over. Yeah, it'll take a little bit of time. It'll be uncomfortable, but consider it an investment. So on that note, whether you're working from home, working in GC co-working locations, or soon to be going back to working in the actual office, the way we're working in the distributed model will most definitely become our new reality. So we hope you enjoyed the presentation, perhaps even learned something new, and we'll go to the next slide so you can see our resources, and open the floor to questions. Which on my end anyway, well, on everybody's end here, we'll answer in the official language of your choice.
Merci, les amis. So thanks so much, guys. I know that there's so much to talk about when we're talking about distributed teams that you can't even scratch the surface in a 1-hour session. So thanks for the tools and the resources that you shared with us and some of your personal tips and tricks. I think before we dig into the actual Q&A though, one question did come up in the chat, and for those people who maybe are multitasking and working and didn't read the chat, would one of you like to explain to all of our attendees today what exactly is FlexGC, how it started, and how they can get involved?
Sure. So we are a grassroots collective of all across government employees at all different levels. We've come together on a volunteer basis to work across the system and help support our colleagues during this really unconventional time. We recognized that there was a need as people were pivoting, and some of us who had worked this way remotely before recognized that there was a huge adjustment period that goes along with working this way. And so we thought we could help. And that's essentially who we are and how we came to be.
Perfect. And I know that Paul is itching to tell us, how can people get involved, Paul, if they want to contribute, if they want to help, if they know stuff, or they just want to flex that muscle?
Yeah, well, actually, we do have an expression of interest form that's available right now. We'll try to get it into the chat. So if you're interested in getting involved with FlexGC, we're actually looking for some support in communications, research and development, and also we're wanting to have an ambassador network as well. And so that's the next step, and we're on it. So I will, while we're answering questions, I'll go get that information and punch it in the chat for you guys.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Paul. So I can say from my experience of working with FlexGC, what I really think is amazing about it is that the FlexGC network is bringing together all the tools that everyone is working on across different departments. So if your department, for example, is tasking you as an individual to put something together, well, you don't have to start from scratch. The FlexGC network is trying to stay connected with all the different departments, all the different networks, the communities of practice, and all the individuals who are doing different things, so that we can all share the work that we're working on and work in the open and share best practices, best tools. And that way no one has to start from scratch, because that is kind of a waste of time. Working in silos is ridiculous, in my opinion. So I'm glad to see that FlexGC is working so hard, because I know that a lot of people are reaching out and asking them for help. Even with team charters, that was the biggest thing right at the beginning, because people didn't really know what to do with their team and how to run their team. And I know that that's something that if you don't have on your team, that you should definitely talk about at your next team meeting.
And just to note, Jen, we do sessions on an on-demand basis. And Paul, if you could post that link on how people could book us as well. We do customizable sessions and come in and do smaller presentations for people who would like to present just to their team as well.
Absolutely. That's perfect. Thanks, Natasha, for bringing that up. So let me go and see if we have any questions. Oh, I see there's one in the Q&A. I'm not used to doing this. Oh, what is your favorite collaborative tool? Oof, these guys are all tool junkies. So you ask the right people. When you're working with them, there's always a new and exciting tool. Today, Jamboard, I'd never seen that before. So why don't you guys each tell us what's your favorite tool and why, without trying to sell us on using it right away, because we're all having a little bit of tool learning fatigue.
Well, I think, we all could have favorite tools, but we have to use the tools that are accessible within our department. So, I personally, for my work, I'm using MS Teams right now, and that is the tool of choice. We are using the channels and the planner functions and tasking. But, on my side of the desk, when I'm working on FlexGC, we're using Slack, which I really enjoy. I'm also using that as a free agent as well as our communication tool. So I would say that my favorite tool is Slack. That's the one that I'm probably using the most. However, there are some creative tools, like I had spoken about a Miro board, which is very similar to Jamboard. And both of those are really good collaborative tools. So if you're working in a meeting with your colleagues and you would like to collaborate in a distributed model where you used to maybe do sort of the unconference style and put post-it notes on the wall and throw your ideas up, this is a way where you can still do that virtually, but you don't actually need to be in a room together, and you still feel the same culture and dynamic that's built from those exercises, doing it this way virtually as well with those tools. Paul or Christine?
For me, I'll go ahead. For me, it's Slack all the way. I've been on Slack for 4 years. I am a big Slack ambassador. If you need help with Slack, just connect with me. No, seriously, I think it's been just great to be able to collaborate and see what's going on, because it works in channels and you can see what's going on within the discussion. And it's good when there's new people coming in, because they can go through the channel and look at the conversation and information that's pinned to be looked at as a reference. So it's a good way to keep the knowledge within, I guess, within the team, and to onboard easily new people and to connect with other people. Like I've been connecting with all the FlexGC member, and it's been like nice. It's funny because we're all apart and I feel more connected than ever since the pandemic, which is kind of funny. I'll let Paul go if he has something to add.
Yeah, and Christine, that's the reality of things. I used to work for a tile distributor, and I had a relationship with my customers who are all over the country, but simply over the phone. You know, there's no reason why we can't have that kind of relationship, and so the question becomes, how do we make it easier or more interactive? Yeah, so there are tons of tools out there. As Natasha noted, my favorite tool is the one that works in your department, because at the Quebec Federal Council's Innovation Lab, our job is to support federal departments in Quebec. And so when we do have collaborative projects with them, that's the first thing that we figure out, which tools work, right? And there are all sorts of equivalents. We talked about Miro, you know, there's Jamboard, Concept Board, you've got Fun Retro that we recently found out was available at the CRA. So there's lots of stuff available out there, but as you said, Christine, you have to test it out. My favorite is Microsoft Teams. I think one of the reasons why is simply data related, just because, you know, everybody has access on GC servers, and at the same time though, Teams is catching up, because Slack is a very, very proud competitor to Teams. I'd say that they're actually better than Teams right now, but slowly but surely, I'm sure that we're going to see some very interesting options come around, and which will make it more interesting. And we already have, just, you know, at the beginning, don't know if you guys remember, but we could only see 4 people on Teams. Now we're up to, you know, Together View, and which is kind of weird, quite frankly, but Together View and
Agreed.
But,
Totally.
but they're trying things, you know, and they're trying to address user needs. They've got Teams on it, so I mean, I have total faith that that product is going to be, you know, as good as Slack eventually.
Yeah, and Teams for collaboration, like just for the purpose of working in a distributed team and going back to the subject matter, I think that like the OneNote option where you can share documents and collaboratively work very much like you would in a Google Shared Drive, which is another tool, is very helpful, especially if you're you know, working on some document that you need input from your colleagues and you want to track changes. You can definitely do that through Teams, and then, you know, remember to share your final copy on whatever government repository system you're using, so that you have an official IM copy somewhere after it's done. But it's good for the middle work, you know, when you're really rolling up your sleeves and working. As well, one other tech tool which I really like for working collaboratively and distributed, especially when you're leading a meeting and you want to engage your staff, is Slido. And I know you need an account. It is a paid account, but it is worth the investment. It's a minimal investment to be able to have these open platforms where people can share, either, you know, they can own their statement, or they can comment anonymously if they're feeling that they might want to have that privacy link to the statement. But it allows for some of that conversation and dialogue to happen in team meetings, in town halls, in whatever you need, where you can have that communication and that back and forth.
Awesome. We've got a lot of questions coming and I'm looking at the time. I'm going to see if I can finish it off on time. Frank, did you want to add to the team and tell us what your favorite tool is before we move on to the next question?
Sure. Thanks, Jen. Sorry for chiming in late. I was helping out Paul, Christine, and Natasha in the background. So I'm a member of the FlexGC network, and my favorite tool is probably Slack. I've been using it for over 3 years, and like many of the others who have already answered that, it's something I'm used to, and like I think Paul said it earlier, if you find something, stick with it, and find out what you like to do, what your team likes to do and use. And for me, that's Slack. I use it with probably half a dozen different groups that I belong to, so it works well across departments, as long as you can access it. So there's always that accessibility issue. So that's all I have, Jen.
So one of the questions, and I'm going to try to answer some of the questions as we go through them so that we can get to the ones that I don't know the answers to. Are things like Slack free for use in government, and are they available to the public? So yes, I got it and I didn't pay for it, so the answer must be yes. Another question is, how do you get people to use it? I had written in the chat the answer that I believe to be true, and then you guys can weigh in with your tips. But for me, I know that Marcella and I have been trying to use Slack on our team and nobody wants to use it. So we keep conversations in there that we don't put anywhere else, so that you have to go there if you want to find out what's going on. Does anybody else have tips?
I'm not the only one with a barking dog. This is, I think, where the team charter comes in really handy, because you can get buy-in from all of your colleagues, where it's sort of where you all throw your hands in and you break, you're deciding this is the platform we're going to use. This is the way we're going to use it. And we are not going to use email, and we're just going to use Slack unless it needs to be tracked in a different way for security reasons or what have you. And then we can go ahead and informally communicate while we collaborate. And then when it needs to be formal, that's when we use another mechanism. So like the team charter, I find very handy for that reason.
And I think that Christine was right that you have to give yourself time. You can't just try using Slack for a week and then decide it doesn't work. I know that Marcella and I, for example, at FYN, we have had Slack probably for 6 months. And I think really we still don't really use it the way that you guys use it at Flex.
And it is difficult, if I may, it is difficult to try to learn a tool when you're rushed and you're like, well, I talk for me because we're doing COVID stuff. I've been checking my emails because I'm the contact for COVID related stuff. And yeah, it is kind of unnerving because you're like, well, I'm so used to doing it this way, but it's give it a chance, give it a try. It's a powerful tool, and once you know all the little details, and you learn one tips and trick at a time, divide it down, and you can have a team of like ambassador or people that will like structure the workspace. You need to have somebody that would structure it and organize it in a good way, in a way that would be practical for everybody, and then to show them how to use it. And like I've got a Slack tips and trick channel for us, and I shared like 20 tips and tricks, but I said, just go whenever in between meetings, when you have 2 minutes, go learn one and try it for a few days and then move on to another one. And then once you know one and you're talking to somebody else one-on-one, you can say, hey, have you learned this new trick? Like I've been trying to ask others, like donner au suivant, is to try to maximize all the little features available with that specific tool, but you can do that with other tools.
For every platform, you can Google the tips and tricks for it. I know that on our wiki pages, there is an MS Teams sort of like beginner and advanced, tutorial. And they're in video format, they're in little nugget chunk sizes, and you can really just go in there and take your time and learn at your pace, whatever your pace may be.
Now, this question is completely a pivot, and I really wanted to make sure that we touch on some different subjects. So this kind of swings back to what Paul was talking about earlier about developing relationships and team cohesion, which is so hard to do depending on your team. So we had a question that was, sometimes initiating conversations with team members can seem transactional or slightly awkward. How do you initiate small talk? So it's interesting because none of us, well, I didn't know any of you actually before COVID-19, and now we all kind of know each other fairly well. So do you guys want to share some of your tips about kind of going from transactional colleagues to breaking into that friend relationship situation? How do you do that?
Yeah, and you don't necessarily need to be friends. I mean, like, you can be cordial, and I know that, like, it's awkward. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's easy. You just have to sort of gauge the person you're speaking to and adjust to their comfort level. So if you know that they are very formalized in the way that they are speaking to you, then maybe you don't want to start with, you know, like, what did you do this weekend? Maybe you want to say, are you having a good day today? And you can start off with something very small and easy. And that allows for someone to give, you know, a human answer. You know, they can give yes because or no because, and that then allows you to develop something organic. I try to ask open questions as opposed to closed questions, because then it forces you to give me a response. So just think about that when you are preparing, you know, what you might like to say. I am a planner, so I do even plan the questions I want to ask people ahead of time. It is like a sick, bad quality, but also good. I think, like, it can bother some people, but it can't. But I have to think about things ahead of time. And so I do think about, like, I wonder, you know, what does so-and-so do on their weekend? I saw in their background a set of skis. Are they skiers? You know, they have, you know, 4 dogs barking. Do they have 4 dogs, or is it just 2? Like, these are things that you can just ask people and start conversation organically, break that ice, and have that comfort zone established, just, you know, with small little steps at a time. I think that right now we're all sort of we're locked in our homes. We're all sort of craving that water cooler talk. We want to virtually walk through our offices, and we don't know how. So I bet that for most people who feel that it might be difficult to have that icebreaker, that they might be surprised and find out that it's the opposite, and that the person on the other end might welcome that conversation.
It's a really great point, Natasha. And I love that you talked about the skis in the background. And I only have 2 dogs. I own them. I don't have a side hustle as a dog daycare. It just sounds that way. But I think that that's true. And I think that that's usually the advice I give people about networking in real life, is find something about someone that you hear or see that you probably have in common. And then you can kind of ask them probing questions that way to make the small talk. Talking about COVID, talking about the weather now that it's fall, those are kind of like downer subjects. So try to find something a little more interesting to talk about, new tools you've tried or funny things that have happened. You can follow people on Twitter. There's always hot gossip on there. Last week, for example, when the message came out about dress code for online meetings, I know a lot of us wanted to chat about that. If you didn't see it, you should look it up on Twitter. It's super funny. Funny, not funny, but funny's just the same. So we only have a couple seconds left. Do you guys want to give us any parting words on behalf of Flex and how we can get involved and support you, or on behalf of Distributed Teams 101 and what you want people to take away from the session?
I would just welcome people to follow us on Twitter. We are at FlexGC Info, so please go and give our page a little click and follow us. And we're always sharing our content everywhere. So we do have a web page as well that we are launching this week. So we will be sharing that on the GC Wiki page, on our website. We'll share the link in the side panel. So yeah, and I also want to say thank you to FYN for having us for these 7 sessions that we've been developing and we've launched. This is our 7th and final session. And so I just want to say thank you to you and Josh and your crew for having us. It's been awesome.
Well, I think on behalf of the public service, we should be thanking you guys, because the work that you're doing on the corner of your desk, it's no one's actual job to do FlexGC. And I think it's important to be bringing all of these tools together for people to try, to be subject matter experts and sharing things you've already done and best practices, things not to do. I think that that's really amazing. So their network is very new, but they are launching a bunch of new things on Friday. You can follow them on the Canada School of Public Service event page. There's a big event on Friday that you can still register for. They're going to have some senior leaders talking about distributed teams and the future of virtual work. We're going to ask them some hard questions. We're going to talk about the real reality and not the fairy tale unicorn reality. What's it really going to look like in the future, and where are we going? So check it out on the school's website, reach out to FlexGC, and on behalf of the Federal Youth Network, thank you. Merci à tout le monde, and have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.